So welcome everyone. This is the session on the Middle School Learning Kit, Addressing Change During the Adolescent Years. My name is Michelle Cheney and I am the Impact Coordinator. I'm joined today by Pat Lothian, my colleague from our member state, Montana. And today we're going to share with you a little bit about the Middle School Learning Kit that was developed by our Impact team to be used with and by our migratory families that have middle school age children. Just a little bit about the consortium. We are 8 states strong. Pennsylvania is our lead state, and the overall goal of the consortium is to strengthen the involvement of the migratory parents in the education of their children. A lot of the work that we've done the last 3 years is out of school time, working with parents to think about what they can be doing in the homes with their children to support their children's learning. Not that it requires helping with homework, knowing that they may not all be proficient in English, but what are those things that families do to really drive home that notion of education being important and how to really succeed in school? So I know what we have planned for you today, and that's to highlight our middle school learning kit, but we'd like to hear from you as well. Please drop in the chat box why you attended this session, selected this one, or what you're hoping to take away. And we'll give you just a second to do that. And then I'm going to pull them up and take a quick look at them. Because as important as kind of sharing with you the materials that we've developed as a consortium, we would like to make sure that your answers or the questions that you have today are answered. And if we can't do that today, we will certainly follow up with you to be able to make that happen. So let's see what we have in here. What are folks hoping to take away today? Okay, looking for a variety of service materials, instructional materials. Further supports for families. Fantastic. All right, so keep those coming. I will review those periodically. And like I said, we want to make sure that we highlight what we've been able to put together as a consortium and how it was used and how well it was received. But also just get you some information too, if that's not within what we're covering today. We'll follow up with you. All right, so our middle school learning kits. In the second year of our consortium, team members really centered energies around working with middle school age migratory students. This is such a critical time in children's lives. It's filled with changes, and we wanted to ensure that the students and their families had information and resources around those different changes and what's happening in a child's life during this time. So just to jump right in, here's an overview of the materials for the middle school learning kit. And we're going to unpack these together little by little as we spend the next hour or so together. But it started with our consortium members putting together a workshop. I use that word loosely because it can be used with groups of families together or in the home, family by family, but putting together a PowerPoint which encompasses a set of materials and activities to help the families gain some initial background information and think about all of the different changes that happen during those middle school years, what the kids are going through. So we wanted to be able to elicit background, build background, provide resources and information for the families, and really kind of frame out what the rest of the materials in the unit look like. And then we have some materials that would be used with the families after, and you see those in front of you. We've got a wordless book that we selected to use. Obviously, we wanted something that was that all the families in the 8 different states who were being asked to use these materials and resources could access. And so we specifically chose a wordless book for that reason. And I'll dig deeper into what the book is about a little further down the presentation, but it's a really great book if you haven't seen it. We've got the Rethink card deck. That's to help conversations, especially those hard to have conversations around personal topics. And we know that middle school kids, anybody who's ever been around a middle school child, has a middle school child, or had one who was in middle school at some point of your own child, this is a time where they like to kind of assert their independence, and they're pulling back and they're withdrawing a little bit from having those family conversations. But it's such a crucial time for keeping the conversation open and going. And then we selected a workbook that has more than 60 activities in it for middle school age kids and their families, all around organizing materials and resources, thinking about your own thinking, so those executive function skills, and then coping strategies. So it's really nicely done, very well put together. Little bit just about what's in there. In just a sec, I'm going to turn everything over to Pat, and she's going to jumpstart our look at that initial PowerPoint, that initial webinar or set of activities that we would do with our families to get them ready to use the rest of the materials and really dig into the topic. And then we're going to walk you through an activity that we actually do with the families. So you're going to want to have a piece of paper and a pencil handy here in just a couple of minutes. Pat, you want to take it away?
Hello, I am Pat Lothian. You might see Mary Pat on the screen. That is my first real name, Mary, but I go by Pat. And I'm from Billings, Montana, and I'm a 41-year educator, and I'm lucky enough to be a part of the migrant program and impact for the last 3 years. And one of the areas that we know is critical, moving from elementary as an elementary teacher for 41 years and moving into the middle school years, these 4 areas seem to be critical areas in the livelihood of middle school children and all adults. So when you are taking a look at these 4 areas, physical, social, emotional, and intellectual, we're going to take a look at this from a growth perspective, from a balance perspective. What I want you to think about right now is I want you to kind of just close your eyes for a minute and picture yourself in middle school. Now, I happen to be in middle school in Southern California, and that's where I grew up and spent most of my time. I know how critical middle school years can be and how challenging they can be as a person wading through those waters. Being a former elementary teacher, parents always are under the impression that once they leave elementary school, I don't have to stay as close to them as maybe I would have when they were younger. And we have found through tremendous amounts of research that these 4 areas are critical for the overall growth of a child. So take a look here, and what we're going to do is break these down, talk a little bit about them, show you ways to engage with your families. Some of us are engaging during the summer school with these activities in a classroom with children. Some people have taken it kits, individual kits, and use them with families at home. Some of them have used the kits in more of a setting with larger groups of people. So depending on how you find yourself working in your particular migrant program, it lends itself in a lot of different ways. So first off, we're going to talk a little bit about the physical part of an individual and the social part. Now think about this for a minute. Your physical self. When you left middle or elementary school and rolled on into middle school, all of a sudden I noticed in 4th grade things started changing for my kids. And as they moved on into 5th grade and now middle school starts at 6th grade level, the hormones that are happening within children alone is a huge physical change. Then you've got to change the brain. The brain chemistry is shifting. We know now that brains aren't fully developed until children and adults are 25 years old. So there's a lot of components going on there. And I want you to think about a chair being those 4 legs of those 4 components we just mentioned. And I want you to think about these 4 pieces as one leg of the chair. And so when you think about a chair is sturdy if you're all on all 4 legs. But if you kick out one of those legs, or one of those legs isn't as functioning as well as it should be, now you're on a 3-legged stool. And you can still, do a lot on a three-legged stool. But if you kick out that next leg and you're only on two legs, now everything's going to topple. So I want you to keep that in mind as we move through these four areas. Now, another thing that's physically challenging for kids is some kids, if you think about the word physical in a different way, some kids are getting physical with each other more so in the middle school than they ever have before. Maybe they've got a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You've never had a conversation about being physical with another human being and is it appropriate or not. You think about things like getting physical with activities or sports or injuries. You think about physical being, am I getting enough sleep? Am I possibly substance abusing and it's causing me angst because I can't sleep? I'm hyped up. Who knows what might be going on? Are your basic needs being met? Are you getting the right nutrition? Are you getting your, eyes and body checked periodically to make sure your health is okay? So you want to visit with families want to visit with their children about the physicality of the human body. Then you've got the social. Now, think about yourself in middle school. I don't know about you, but when I was in middle school, all I could think about was, oh my goodness, what are people thinking of me? Am I going to be able to make new friends? Because I had a lot of friends in elementary school, but now there's a whole different population. The diversity in middle school is huge. Some of the questions that kids worry about is social media now. We didn't have to worry about that back in the day, but nowadays, are they going to talk to me on TikTok? Are they going to, say something bad about me on social media? How are we, am I starting to isolate because I'm feeling uncomfortable? Now that we have post COVID, one of the biggest issues socially is people had been off, alone, isolated for so long. And now sometimes it's hard for them to have a face to face conversation with another child because they haven't had opportunities to do that. And it feels safer to stay on their iPad or their iPod or their cell phone or something where they're constantly looking at a screen. So sometimes those social interactions can be challenging. So social seems to be a huge issue in middle school. Now, the other two areas, and one kind of, I think, glares at me most, is the emotional piece of a human being in the middle school. Their bodies are changing. Their hormones are jumping around. They're worried about things that, you know, we we as middle schoolers always worry about, and that is friendships. Post COVID, the levels of anxiety and depression have ramped up exponentially, unilaterally throughout the country in all populations. And if people could have an opportunity to communicate and listen more, they would start to begin to see some of the emotional stresses that are surrounding some of these kids. So, asking simple questions to your children, and or if you're in a small group or if you're in a classroom setting, depending on where you're sharing this, it's important to listen and communicate in order to feel stronger and to feel healthier emotionally. Now, the other one that we're dealing with too is intellectual. Some kids don't view themselves as smart, or they're challenged because in elementary school they had one teacher and now they have 6 or 7 different teachers. Maybe there's a teacher mismatch, and maybe you don't get along with the teacher. And so that's affecting your studies. Or maybe you don't know how to organize yourself. One of the biggest fears middle schoolers have is just opening their locker. Am I going to be able to get what I need out of my locker so I can get to class on time, so I can learn what I need to learn? Some of those basic things like teacher relationships, is the class going to be too tough for me? Do I have the right set of skills to be able to go through 6 different teachers with 6 different expectations about what it is that I need to learn? So having some of these conversations with family members helps open the door to where the fears are at, where some of the concerns are at, where some of the things that need to be addressed might be. And that is critical. Now, take a minute. If you have something to write with, great. If you don't, try to find something. I'm battling a bit of a cold. Um, but if you do this with your families, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can use colored pencils, crayons. You could just use a pencil if that's all you've got. But taking a blank sheet of paper, folding it into four quadrants, and numbering it. If you see on one of the slides, it has 0 to 10. We're kind of looking at a scale of 0 to 10. So when you've had these conversations with your children or your migrant families, and you talk with them about the four quadrants, you're going to want them to think about their own life physically. Where do they see themselves physically on a scale of 0 to 10? And you can use different colors. So maybe physical is red and social is blue and emotional is orange and intellectual is black. Whatever colors you want to use, or you don't even have to do that. It depends on, what materials you have available. But you're going to evaluate yourself in these four areas. What, at the current time, where do you see yourself in these four areas? Now, understand, and that might be a conversation you need to have as well, is we're changing all the time. How we look physically right now today may not be how we look a month from now or a year from now. So you can do these activities on an ongoing basis to show growth or to show areas that we've fallen short. There's lots of ways to take a look at this. But what we're trying to get folks to do is identify not all the areas necessarily to work on, but to just pick one. So let's, for instance, say my educated guess would be one of the areas that's hard for middle schoolers is the emotional area. And maybe they're low in that area. Maybe they're a 2 or a 3 in the emotional area and doing quite well in the other areas. Down the road, as you look through this PowerPoint, we have some strategies for you to take a look at a particular area that maybe, I don't want to say weak, but an area that we're not as comfortable in right now. So thinking about your own middle school years, you might want to think about what area you were struggling in the middle school, and just put that in the chat.
Thank you, Pat.
You're
And
welcome.
I'm going to walk folks through, again, what we would continue with families when we have them together. So let me just recap a little bit of what Pat has shared. We do bring parents and the middle school age children, and often other family members wanted to join the sessions also. So most appropriate for anybody from upper elementary through high school. We did not include early elementary kids at the table when doing all of this. And they were given some background information. So that information about the physical, social, emotional, intellectual areas of development that Pat just covered, that's what we shared with families. We did ask all of the families, including the kids, those middle schoolers or the older kids who were there, to create their own personal balance chart. And if you didn't do that yet, please take 30 seconds and go ahead and do that so that you can look at your own personal balance chart right now here today. And then, of course, the next step. So now that folks know a little bit about the different areas, and they have identified an area that maybe is a little down or that they want to strengthen and work on, we needed to give them some information to be able to do that, right? We don't want to leave them hanging with just having identified that gap area. So the rest of the presentation talks a little bit about each of the different areas and provides some suggestions and some more details about what families can do if that area is low. So just as a point of example, we'll look at creating social balance. And what we shared with families were different areas that lend themselves to balance in the area of social interactions. So those include things on your screen that you see like friendships, communications, interests. So we walk families through some of the different areas and some of the different activities that lend themselves to enhancing that area of social interaction. And then beyond that, we want to give them time to really wrestle with the concepts, for lack of a better way to say it, right? So just getting information isn't enough. We need to start moving them in the areas of digesting the information, and then momentarily, you're going to see that we push folks toward setting some goals and acting on the information that they received. And so in addition to the general information about the different areas, in this case, that address social growth and development, we provided families with questions that we asked them to pick one or two and have a conversation with their kids right then and there during our session about this, as it tied to their social area, as it tied to their balance chart. And so, you can see some examples of the questions. How do you make new friends? What qualities do you look for? These are meant to be a little bit of a deeper dive into some of those core beliefs and core values. And of course, I did mention, all right, so we've gotten a lot of information to the families. They've created their personal balance charts. They've gotten a little bit more information about each of the different areas and how they could address an area that's out of balance. So now it's time to take action or make some changes. And that is what we ask them to do. Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over, you're going to get the same results. So if something is out of balance, we need to be doing something different to get it back in balance. And that is very much what we ask the families to do. So we have some take action activities for them in the different areas. So again, thinking about social action needing to be taken, if the social area of my balance chart was needing a little attention, or of my life as that balance chart represented, we can begin to nail down some things that we can commit to doing, setting some short-term goals. And so one example to look at is, I wanted to have more friends. I need to try to connect with at least 2 people a week by asking them to do something with me. And so the adolescent, set a personal goal to reach out to someone that maybe they're acquainted with at school or in a local community organization, but not really friendly with, or don't consider a friend yet, and say, hey, I'm going to be the one to reach out and see if they'll stay with me after school or join me to do something at my house, whatever it may be. So we allow the families time during this initial either workshop setting with them or individual family time in their house as we're doing all of these activities, to really get to the point where they're setting some short-term goals to act on that area that needs a little bit of attention. And so what we want you to do right now is to go back to that personal balance chart that you just made and identify that area that needs more balance and set an action item or a goal for yourself. So go ahead and just take a few seconds to do that. And pop your answers into the chat room. So you can say, social was my area out of balance, and I'm going to commit to going to a yoga class once a week. Whatever it is that's out of balance and a goal that you want to set for yourself, pop those in the chat box for us. And I'm going to open the chat box and take a look and see what's in there. All right, I don't see any goals coming yet, but I know you'll pop them in there. Oh, here come a couple. Exercise every morning. Update your Outlook calendar, awesome. Cook healthier meals, fantastic. Read more books to relax, perfect. All right, so again, I hope that you see in this whole session that we're doing with families kind of the evolution, understanding these 4 growth areas and their importance for middle school age kids, working on a personal balance chart so that they can each individual in the family can identify an area that might not be at its best that they want to work on. Then we provide information about how to do that, and then we ask them to set a goal around it. So at this point, and I think this is really important and worth mentioning, I'm going to turn it back to Pat for a couple of minutes to talk about this. Sometimes it's more than just being out of balance, right? Or sometimes that out of balance is more than just a temporary situation. And so one of the things that we felt strongly about as a group of states in this consortium is making sure that the parents have information that says, you know what, here's some things to think about overall for middle schoolers, and here's some things to think about that might be more serious and deserve more attention than what we've presented with you today, or deserve some sort of intervention by another professional outside the realm of what migrant education program does. And so, Pat, let me turn it back over to you to talk a little bit about.
Yes, what I'd like to talk a little bit about is in the kit that you might be working with your parents, there's going to be a book called Middle School Matters. And I've read that book cover to cover, and I've worked with families. And it's very interesting because families don't always realize some of the key areas that they need to focus on with their child. Yes, they kind of held their hand through the elementary grades. And now that they've hit the middle school, sometimes they feel, again, I said this earlier, that they can back away. But it's really a critical time for parents to stay fully engaged with their middle schooler. And taking a look at these bullet points, making good friend choices. I have seen more children in the middle school go south because of this issue. And sometimes the peer pressure that is put on people in general at all ages, but primarily the first time they encounter it to a large degree is in the middle school. And if they have some things in place and you've had the conversations at home surrounding friendships and how important those choices are, it's critical for kids to know that it's okay sometimes to have to let go of a friend because it's not working for either one of you. Negotiating conflict is huge because sometimes the conflict lies with them and you, the parent, them and their parent. Sometimes the conflict lies with them and their friends. Also, it could a huge negotiating conflict between a girl and a boyfriend, or maybe a teacher and the student. And sometimes parents aren't aware of the conflicts that might be going on in their child's life. But if the parent takes a look at just these bullet points and addresses these periodically and does kind of a checkup, how are you doing today? Do you got any conflicts going on in your life that you want to talk about? I think the hardest conflict that middle schoolers have is the separation from themselves and their parent. Because when you're in the elementary school, you can walk into the school and hug your child at any point, mostly, and they're pretty comfortable with that, or give them a kiss on the cheek as they're leaving to go into the building for the day. But you enter the middle school and you hug your child outside of school or show any physical attention to them, they act like your hair's on fire. Don't touch me. Stay away. There's a whole different feeling about it at the middle school than there maybe was in elementary school. Now, managing a student-teacher mismatch, sometimes in the elementary school, there is an issue there. And sometimes there has to be a movement from the child to a different classroom. But in middle school, the child for the first time is facing 6 or 7 different teachers. And some of them they're going to connect with very well. Some of them they're not going to connect with. And maybe there might even be one that they feel anxious or tremendous anxiety when they have to deal with that teacher day in and day out. And sometimes parents will say, well, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Sometimes that's okay. But sometimes the anxiety that children feel surrounding a particular teacher that's a mismatch for them might be so great that you as the parent need to intervene and make some help the child together work as a team with the school to make some positive changes. One of the biggest issues that a lot of children face, especially if they have ADD or ADHD issues, is creating homework and organization spots and ways. Now, one of the biggest things I dealt with when I was in elementary is they would say, Mrs. L, how am I going to keep track of all this work that I got to do? And how am I going to get my homework done if 6 teachers are asking me to do different things? So you can't assume as a parent that they're going to be able to navigate this alone because most of them cannot. And they find out very quickly how fast they can get behind in homework if they don't have a method or something that works for them. And sometimes sitting down as a family, if you have 5 kids in your family, all 5 of them approach things very differently. So what might work for one of the children in the family as you talk to your migrant kids and their parents might not work for another child. And learning to navigate, older children can kind of help younger children think about ways that might work for them to navigate homework and those types of things. Also, one of the big ones is consider others' perspectives. There's a lot going on in the middle school, a lot more than was going on back when we were in middle school. There's different communities of kids, there's different gender issues, there's all kinds of things going on. So you have to help them understand that behind the face is a story, and you can't always assume that you know what the story is. So helping them understand other people's perspectives is critical. Advocating for themselves. If you don't advocate for yourself, who will? And some kids are too shy to do that. And so that's where parents come in. Sometimes it's critical, especially if you have a child that has high anxiety or some depression issues, and they're very fearful of talking with the teacher. Helping them advocate, you being the advocate with them can, help that anxiety not explode into more depressive issues. Cultivating passions and so on. um, a lot of kids, school is not their thing. They don't love the academics of school, but they do have other passions like music or sports or, comedy or whatever it might be. Helping them understand that, yes, academics are important, but they may have other passions that you're not really aware of that they want to explore that keeps them in school, but also allows them to have fun outside of school. Making the responsible and healthy choices. Now that we all know that that isn't going to happen every single time, but helping children recognize when they're not making the healthy choice or what to do if they're really being pressured with peer pressure and trying to find that balance, because we're not perfect. No human is. And at the middle school, we'll be challenged in different ways by a lot of different groups of people, and it's very difficult sometimes for kids to make those responsible, healthy choices under the pressure of that peer pressure. I love the last one, create and innovate. I've seen so many amazing things happen in the middle school because of the different kinds of out of the box thinking that happen with kids, and teaching them not to be fearful of their thoughts. Maybe they're different than other kids are, but that's what makes the world turn. So this book is kind of critical in the areas, as you may have to help your parents navigate through it, but if you can have them look at some of these critical areas and over the course of a year talking to their children about these particular areas, I think they would have a lot more success. Michelle? Now, this is an area is my personal passion because I deal in the world of mental health myself. I have a son that has mental illness. I work with an organization here in Billings called NAMI, and I have seen the increase of issues for not only children, but adults. Every single human on the planet has been through trauma because of COVID. And we were sitting around worrying about, are we going to die? Are our parents going to die? Am I going to die? People around us have had all sorts of challenges coming out of COVID. And in the middle school, when you mix what just happened to the world and you mix what's going on in middle school with their hormonal shifts, the fact that the brain is still developing, and one of the areas that's hard for them at this stage is that frontal part of the brain where they're not always making the best choices. When you see your child starting some of these issues here, losing interest, starting to cry easily, tends to start isolating. Their sleeping patterns are changing. Their eating habits are changing. Kids are suffering today like never before, and I've seen it over and over again in the statistics from two things mostly: anxiety and depression. And when you think about either of those in relationship to your own life, most people have some form of anxiety going at any given point. Maybe they're at a 2 in anxiety today, but tomorrow they're at a 10. It's ebbing and flowing all the time. And sometimes in the middle school, because the body is changing so much and they have so many things that they are so conscious about, their body size, their friendships, am I going to be in the in crowd or am I going to be ostracized? It doesn't take much, especially with social media in the ways that it's being utilized these days, to put somebody into a place that's not comfortable. And so when you, if you're talking to your migrant families and you're talking to their children and they start to see things going south, as a migrant, person supporting the family, one of the areas that they can go to is NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. There's always a mental health probably area in their community that they could reach out to. There's many counselors besides school, because sometimes school isn't the place for a more severe issue that you might have with one of your children or one of your migrant children or the family has. Some children have even gone so far as to have their first psychotic break in the middle school, and it can come fast and quick. So the thing that we want you to understand about this slide in particular is don't wait. Reach out when you even wonder about something, because it will help you help that child be more successful in school.
Thank you, Pat. I just want to stop and kind of contextualize again so that folks can envision how this all goes when we're working with the families and the kids, right? So this ends kind of that initial, whether it's a workshop or a one-on-one with them in their home, all of that information and conversation, eliciting or building background and kind of contextualizing these 4 areas of social, emotional, intellectual, and physical change and development during the adolescent middle school years. That's a lot of information for families. And so the rest of the kit was really executed either through multiple sessions, subsequent sessions, or, those one-on-ones in the home with service providers. And that's what we're going to stop and take a look at now quickly. And then we are going to allow some time at the end. I think there's some questions in the chat box, and we'll take some questions at the end. Pat, did you want to talk a little bit about the conversation cards, or do you want me to go ahead?
No, I just want you to know these are so fun. Love doing these. In the summer, I do them in the summer school with the kids. You can do them with your families. And I think one of the greatest ways to do these would be Like, let's say you taught the family how to use the cards. You can use them in lots of different ways. So let's say the family wants to start their morning out at the breakfast table. We need to get together more as families anyway, at the breakfast table, at the dinner table. But anyway, you can pull a card out for the day. You can read it to the kids in the family. The kids can all be thinking about what it is they want to share. And maybe that night when they get home from whatever they've done during the day, they can say, hey, how do you show people you care about them? That's compassion. The 4 cards are divided into 4 areas. You can see from the first one, connect. Name something that captured your attention on your way here this morning. Well, for me, it was a bird singing out my window. How do you show compassion or you care about them? I like to have a conversation. I don't know about you, but everybody's different in the way they approach these. Gratitude is another card area. Insight is another card area. So there's 5 days in the week. Maybe you pick one from each category 4 days out of the week, and then it's just kind of a shot in the dark on the last 5th day. Maybe on the weekends you have some time and you play with the deck in a game situation. You can use these rethink cards in so many different ways. And I think I found them, the kids loved doing them in school. And when we were working in our migrant summer school, or when we did them with families in like a workshop setting, they was very excited to share. So the listening and the sharing are critical. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Pat. So each of the families received the following materials: the Rethink card deck, the book I'm going to talk about, and then the workbook for teens. And so that's important to know that they had these as consumables that they could have, keep, use whenever or as much as they wanted to. I also would like you to know that the information that the consortium decided to share with the families in the way that we did is also based on some brain research, right? So we know that if an area is out of balance, like feeling a little bit down emotionally, focusing on an area like gratitude can really reassign pathways in the brain to help with that emotional balance area. So that's not so explicit when we talk about what we did with families, the materials that we chose, but for you all, we wanted to make sure that you knew that there was a connection to research and brain science behind these different things. All right, so now I have a minute to share with you one of my favorite books all time. It's called Meh. I have a million copies here with me at home. Each of the families got these and was encouraged after a little information. We taught them how to do a book walk, book talk, and kind of walk them through it. And I will do that with you in just a second. But they were encouraged then to go through and have some candid conversations about the boy in the story. So it's always good to start any book for any reason, in any grade level, in any class at school, in any work that you do outside of school with a migrant program, with a book walk, book talk. And that simply is introduce the book, the characters, and a little bit about the story, right? So think about how that sets up your brain to be able to receive the information more fully. And we know that's really important because folks in the world of movie making and book publication know we need a little teaser to be able to be engaged. So this book is called Meh. And if you're around middle school or high school kids, you've probably heard that word so many times, you hope you don't hear it again. Meh is that sort of undefined, not good, maybe not so great, not bad, I don't know, uninvolved, unengaged, right? So in the story, we see this young man who starts out in a very joyful, colorful way. And so there's a lot of symbolism in the book. But what you find as you continue to turn the pages and go through and see his story is that the darkness takes over. And the book actually moves from color to grays and blacks and whites. And then we talk a little bit about the darkness. So we'll share the darkness. And that's where it can be personalized. But he finds the light. There is some light that leads him out of darkness. And so I would ask folks to make a prediction. What do you think happens at the end? Do you think he finds the light again? Do you think the light helps bring color back to his world? So we spend a few minutes with them just kind of giving the overview so they know what they're going to look at. And I just wanted to share a couple of select pages with you, just so that you can see that the story starts out with him and it's in full color, which is symbolic. He's got joy, he's got color in his life. And then something happens where a little bit of darkness, which you may want to call depression or anxiety or some other name, and that's up to each family who's exploring the book from their own perspective with their own background knowledge and their own feelings. But the darkness starts to creep in. And you see eventually that he falls to the darkness. And this is the page where everything turns from there's a little bit of color left there in his skin and his shirt to symbolically everything is dark and the darkness takes hold. And so again, not going to walk you through the whole thing, but you do see part of the way through the story, a little bit of lightness creeps back in this case in the form of a cat, but also thinking about it being symbolic. It may not be a real cat that comes into his life, but it's the light. And then you see paw prints on some of the pages. So the cat gets bigger, the light gets bigger. We see paw prints helping lead him out of the way. And then at the very end, the light is very big and there's a return to color. And so the brightness has been brought back to his life. So just kind of touching on the story, the book that we leave with the parents, show them how to use, but encourage them to use and read, if you will, or discuss, unpack each of the pages over and over a number of different times, a number of different ways, because that darkness, that thing that leads him to be troubled or saddened, that can be different every time. That can be something different every time. And then the light, the path out of it would be different every time. So this book really helps students and their families put words to some of the things that might be troubling them or might affect their balance chart in different areas. And then I gives them a format or a forum for discussing how to get the light back, how to get the balance back. Okay. The last thing is the Coping Skills for Teens workbook. I mentioned 60 activities in here, all around thinking about your own thinking, having strategies for when things aren't going right, learning more about yourself and the way that you react. It is designed for the kids, but appropriate for probably anybody upper elementary through adulthood. And one of the things that really struck me is one of the very beginning activities where kids map out what they can and cannot control. Because how often do kids or even adults get very upset about something that's really out of their control, right? So we had a picnic planned for today and the weather was terrible and we had to cancel, or some other special event that was canceled because of the weather. You know, that's completely out of our control, and as disappointing as it may be, you know, we want to figure out how our response needs to be commensurate with what happened and how it happened or why it happened. And so one of the beginning activities is just listing some things within these concentric circles. What can I control in my world? What can't I control in my world? And then using those as a discussion platform. And so some examples from the book you see right here. I can control my own words and actions and behaviors. I can control how I respond to situations, even when they don't go my way. And then I can't control, and you see things there like other people's actions and feelings. So a good jumping off point for some really critical discussions with the kids about things that are in their control and what does that mean for them. All right. Okay. So you're probably wondering at this point, fantastic, how am I going to be able to do all of this and work through that PowerPoint and all those initial activities and that information dissemination, and then be able to share this with parents, these resources? And so we've put together a facilitator's guide. Everything that you need is on our website, which is impact.org. And if you go to the Educators and Advocates tab at the top right and select instructional materials, about the third or fourth bullet down, you're going to see the middle school learning kit and all the activities and materials that we developed there. You want to pay special attention to the facilitator's guide. So it's a multiple page guide that gives you step-by-step instructions for how to facilitate every single activity and use each resource that we included in the kit. They're basically all set up like lesson plans. So anybody who's reading them, even if you don't have a strong background in instruction or a background in education, you should be able to go through and facilitate those activities expertly with the facilitator's guide. If by chance anybody out there wants additional training on how to use this particular resource or any others that we have put together as a consortium, please just reach out to me or any of our Impact members, and we can help make that happen for you. All right. All right. I do want to leave a couple of minutes for questions. So let me stop sharing my screen. And if anybody who's still out there could pop something in the chat room, if you have questions, let me pull those up and take a look at them. And we'll get you your questions answered. I see lots of goals in here now that folks had a chance to think about their goals. Healthy eating, walk more, read books, get more physical, positive affirmations. Fantastic. And some feedback, the Meh book. Yep, that's a personal favorite. All right, as you think about any questions that you might have about what we presented today or resources, let me ask you this. Our closing activity is to ask you to drop something in the chat box. What did you learn today or from our presentation that you didn't know before you joined us today? Something that you learned from the presentation. And then as you do that, someone asked for contact information. So let me just drop my contact information in here while you guys continue to pop something in there about what you learned today. What particularly resonated with you? And Pat, if you want to pop yours in the chat box, you can do that too. So I see that somebody mentioned that you didn't know this resource existed, and it is pretty, I think, common that if your state is not a direct member of the consortium, you may not know all of the materials and resources that each consortia created. And so each of them, you know, has a place that you can get those. In our case, it's a website. I know Jessica with IDRC and ISOCIA also have websites. And everything that the consortia put together is available to all migrant programs, all states across the United States. So please explore the impact.org website. We have, I'm trying to think of some other things to highlight for you real quick. I mean, there's a middle school brain development and decision-making unit, which will be highlighted during one of our other sessions that's particularly useful. This year, we put together a series of community videos and had a focus on partnering with communities and empowering parents to know more about the resources in their communities and take advantage of those. And so that will also be highlighted. But I strongly encourage you to take a look at that, the website for a number of other resources that have been developed over the last 3 years. All right, and I appreciate folks putting comments in there about the resources, things that you learned, everything was helpful. All right, thank you all and enjoy the rest of the dissemination event.